district, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offer's the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man. Y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be trading. And I always be trading. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
Kind of funny, JD says, okay, we're going live. Everybody clams up. You know, we're having a party beforehand.
He's worried about going live, and he just changed his hat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yes.
I had to,
yeah,
man.
We have to point out the hat that JD has on. He had the GOAT District hat on now. We were going with the Raptors hat because they beat who?
The champs, the Clippers, man. We beat the Clippers. Like it was nothing. 125, 121. We beat the Lakers. We beat everybody, man. We're gonna defend this thing. We might just have to repeat just to let people know that Kawhi wasn't the whole reason why we won it. You know?
Yeah, no doubt.
and I'm sporting some Smashing Pumpkins. What's up?
Oh, look at that.
There you go.
Sure.
Anyone else got some gear? They got what are you wearing there, Mike? You got like a Philly jersey on or something?
We got that in the background.
I like that Sanders jersey.
Like draft board back there, and yeah,
for sure. Just in time for tonight, right? Because tonight it's all about the running backs.
That's right. Yeah,
So,
I had Saquon up there too, but I had to take him down. Last podcast I was on, people like ripped me up. And they're like, "You have Saquon Barkley and Miles Sanders up there." I'm like,
Oh, yeah,
I am a Penn State fan too. I mean, it's like you got to have some allegiance, but
Yeah.
people always have to pick a team, eh? Just always got to be on one side. Can never just like both,
Right.
Anyways, guys, tonight we're going to talk running backs, just how we approach the position. I was lucky enough to have Kyle invite me on his pod to talk running backs, and we're lucky to have him on tonight. Kyle, at Kyle FF Fellas. Kyle, let the people know you've got something you started just recently, which is an awesome podcast. So let the people know where they can find it, what it's about, and anything else you want to share before we get into this thing.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. And yeah, I had a lot of fun with you on the running back show that dropped. Was that yesterday? What's today? Wednesday? Where it dropped yesterday morning on Tuesday. But yeah, for 4 years, man, myself and my former co-host Seth were grinding it out with the Fantasy Football Fellas. 4 straight years, man, never missing a week. 500 episodes, and man, that grind is for real. But a lot of things change, as you gentlemen know, in that time period. So it just felt like for him, it was time for him to take a step back. For me, I still really enjoy podcasting. So rebranded the show as the Fantasy Football Smackdown. Do that usually once a week. Been doing twice a week here and there through August. Just having myself and a guest on for every show, and it's been a ton of fun. Had because I have a guest on every time. Had the pleasure of meeting a lot of new people recently, having people on and things. So I've just been doing it for a couple months, but it's a ton of fun. So you can find that wherever you listen to podcasts. And I'm too lazy to change my podcast handle, so it's still Kyle FF Fellas.
I meant to ask you that. That's funny too. Before we came on.
I don't have a cool name or anything like a nickname. Like I haven't ever even had a nickname in my life, like ever. So it's not like I had anything to work with or whatever.
We gotta find one.
we'll get you one at the end of the pod.
Yeah. All right, we got mission accomplished. So yeah, I mean, you guys can follow me there. Check out the Smackdown, and I'm writing a little bit too. So if you follow me on there, you can see some words that I put on paper.
Nice, man. So go check out Kyle's pod. Like we just said, the last one was also running back, so you'll get a little extra knowledge on that one. And Mike, man, welcome to the GOAT District, brother. At Dynasty_DadFF. If you haven't seen this guy on Twitter, you just haven't been there. So welcome to the GOAT District, my friend.
Hey, thanks for having me on. We actually at the Dynasty Refinery, the episode we recorded right before I jumped on here was running backs as well. So I mean, everybody wants to hear about those running backs right now. I just launched my own solo podcast, the Dynasty Dad podcast. So gonna really focus on having a little bit of lighthearted fun with some dads and kicking back, and then really try to, school people up as far as things like I just did an episode on how to properly do a rebuild. You know, I feel like so many teams just sit somewhere in the fence and do a lot of lessons and things like that. So a lot of cool things going on, ranking over at Dynasty Happy Hour. And then I'm really happy you guys joined in, but I got something that was near and dear to my heart for the No Kids Hungry. You know, I used to be a teacher, and we used to have, work in the city, and there was a lot of students we had that would come in and they wouldn't have anything to eat aside from their school lunch and sometimes their school breakfast. So I would try to, save up their Pop-Tarts from breakfast and try to send stuff home for them. But, we all take those kind of things for granted, and especially with COVID. So I'm, doing a little bit of, trying to raise some money here for that awareness. And I was glad that you guys joined in that league. So I'm excited to get that going too.
Yeah, man, we that's a great cause. It's great to have all these. You see a bunch of tournaments right now and leagues and just people trying to raise money for charity, and it's great, man. And you put together something special yourself, and we're happy to be part of it. I said it before we came on, like Mike's one of those guys that just puts in the hours, he puts in the work, as does Kyle. I mean, I was on with Kyle and he was blowing me away with some of those stats he was dropping. I was trying to write them down as we were going there, and I had to re-listen. But yeah, man, these two guys are awesome. I'm trying to get a nice mix when I bring in a couple guests, like a dynasty focused, and then Kyle is a little more on the redraft. I mean, look, we all play dynasty or fantasy in all different formats, right? At the end of the day. But anyways, we're going to talk running backs tonight. Dan, I haven't even asked you, man. You've been nice and quiet in the corner doing your research, trying to get caught up. You probably haven't even looked at the show sheet. I love it.
Show sheet.
I'll tell you this. I at the beginning of the show on the Smackdown when I had JD on, I follow JD. We've talked here and there. We've been on podcasts before, but I introduced him on for the Smackdown show. I was like, hey, honestly, one of the nicest guys that you'll find on Twitter. And sure enough, when he had his opportunity to promote the Ghost District and all that stuff, he even gave a shout out to you, Dan, gave your Twitter handle, all that stuff. When I had a co-host, I didn't do any of that crap. I was like, he's on his own, man. I'm the one spending the time.
That's right. Yep.
I missed the air horn opportunity there, Dan. No, man, how you doing, brother?
Doing well, definitely. Exciting night around here. We had some family over because the kids are getting ready to go back to college, so they're going to be leaving in a couple days. So they wanted to see their little cousins again, and so we've had a lot of people running around screaming. So I was like, okay, podcast at 8:30. That's it, no more.
Silence, everyone. Let's go in the backyard.
They're doing pretty good though. I mean, for a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, man, they're being pretty darn quiet.
Oh wow, yeah, that is really damn.
It's fun to have them around though.
Always, for sure, right? Brings back memories.
Yep, definitely.
Guys, we're going to talk. We've been doing positions. If you're listening and you haven't checked out previous episodes, go check out. We've covered the quarterbacks, receivers, tight ends. We're doing running backs tonight. So we're going to look at running backs tonight. But before we get into specific players, we want to talk strategy. It's something we like to talk as much as we can on this podcast. And with every position, there's a different strategy, right? So I know when I was on with Kyle, I talked about things like offensive line, getting running backs behind good offensive lines, paying attention to that, especially in COVID. You want that consistency as much as you can. And then also high scoring offenses, with regards to the running back position, because obviously you want touchdowns, you want them to have the ball in their hand, that kind of stuff. So those are a couple things that I pointed out. I won't get too much into my strategy because I don't want to talk about everything before you guys come in. And I'm sure people are, have heard it before, or they're just sick of hearing my voice right now. So I'm going to go to Kyle first. I'm going to give seniority to my boy Kyle. And why don't you? Mike might be older, but I'm just.
I was going to say, I've seniority. That's pretty cool. I don't know if I've ever had seniority before.
I've known you a little longer. We'll go with that.
There you go.
So why don't you tell the people what's your general approach in fantasy at the running back position, and then do you differentiate if you're doing redraft versus dyno and that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the running back position for me, I'll start with the dynasty side of it because I definitely the Smackdown. I talk everything fantasy football, but once we start getting to August, I really focus on the redraft side of things. And then plan is to hammer out, like we did with the fellas, be hammering out shows on a weekly basis to help you set lineups, which everybody, is obviously doing at that point in the season. But from a dynasty perspective, man, it's running backs are just so, I don't know if you can really value them enough. They just carry they're so hard to get, a stud guy. So for me, the biggest approach that I usually take on my dynasty teams is, if I can get the guy for his price, I'm gonna do that, just because whether it's in this, like if it's in the startup or it's in a rookie draft, like I'm always gonna lean that little extra towards it if I think this guy could be a stud running back. Because once you have those on your team, man, you gotta pay up a pretty penny to get them. And obviously, you guys listen to the show, you're active, you can make those trades, make those moves, and hopefully get ahead. And I think we're gonna go through some guys even tonight that you can make a trade for and get ahead before they really hit. But from that perspective, man, I really just try to make sure that I'm spending draft capital on those running backs while still, of course, stacking them. For me, the wide receiver position is has longevity, so kind of having a nice balance between that. For redraft, we just did we ran through some rankings of my tiers for 2020. When you're talking about a redraft league, or even even in a best ball, obviously it changes a little bit. But when you're talking about just a seasonal league, I'm usually not a guy that goes in with any specific plan. I don't want to pigeonhole myself into anything. It's as simple as do some mock drafts and just see how your team plays out. If I don't get at least one, for me, of my top 15 guys, which usually then you have to spend one of your first 3 picks on, I feel like my running backs are really difficult, especially in redraft where you're setting lineups. I don't mind having one running back spot that's completely up in the air, and I really got to just take a bunch of flyers or whatever towards the, middle to end of my draft. If I have that one anchor, I'm good. But if I have 2 open spots and now I'm really juggling, I feel like my teams aren't as strong. I have strength elsewhere. So for me, it just do some mock drafts, see where that tier drop is for you. For me, it's 15 guys. And if I get one of those 15, I feel really good about it. And if I have multiple, then I'm thrilled. That's kind of overall how I'm handling this season. Is just really keeping an eye on that, trying to make sure that I don't miss that drop off, because it gets pretty ugly when you're talking about, oof, this is my RB1 now. It's just you got to keep an eye on it because wide receivers are so deep,
Yeah, those wide receivers are super deep. I'm doing an IDP redraft. The IDP guys, they have a charity for autism tournament going right now, and it's unbelievable how deep it is. You pick defensive players and you're like, oh, I'm missing out on offensive players, and then you're in like the 17th round, 18th round, and Christian Kirk is sitting there.
Mm-hmm.
So the position is definitely deep, no matter where you're drafting, and that just gives more priority to these running backs, right? Especially like you said, Kyle, those maybe top 15 guys, or depending on how you're tiering or ranking these guys. Mike, where do you sit with the running back position? Similar to Kyle, or any differences with your approach?
It's very similar to Kyle. I did that FFPC draft with you guys, and what I try to do is, your running backs 1 through 12, they have basically a 54% hit rate, meaning 54% of the time since 2011, they're going to be an RB1. But when you fall into that RB 13 to 24, it drops dramatically. I mean, it drops down to about 17%. And just further drops down further. So what I tried to do is I usually try to get 2 of those top 12 running backs trade up if I have to, because the wide receiver position is just so deep. I mean, that draft I did with you guys, DJ Chark, Odell Beckham, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, they all went in the 6th round. So if you bang them running backs early, you're getting great value of guys who are wide receiver ones on their team that are going to put up big points for you. In redraft, especially what I really went with is that robust running back. That's what I did in the Scott Fish Bowl, was trying to take as many high volume running backs that are pass catchers, getting those Austin Ecklers. And, in that one, I lucked out getting Zeke, and just pounding the table to get as many running backs as possible because of that wide receiver position being as deep as it is.
Dan, I know we have very similar approaches when it comes to construction. Anything that you want to add to your approach to the running back position, whether it's, best ball, dynasty, whichever format?
No, I think just to kind of highlight a couple things that were said, one of the things I really focus on is not trying to push any particular strategy too hard. Whether you want to call it, whether you're going heavy RB or zero RB or modified zero RB or whatever, different flavor of the week there happens to be this week. I just don't really pay attention to that. In the first rounds, I'm just trying to draft talent, and but I will lean more towards the running back side than the wide receiver side for just the reasons these guys mentioned. It's just easier to find wide receivers deeper down in the draft. I mean, when you're drafting running backs in like the 15th, 16th, 17th round, you can tell yourself a story and you can say, yeah, this guy's got a real good, plausible chance to go out and do something. And then the season comes along and your guy's sitting on the bench, or he gets, like 3 points a game or 4 points a game or whatever, which is, virtually unusable. And yet the wide receivers that were drafted around him, they're getting 8, 9, 10, every now and then 12 points or whatever. So you want to get that running back room set before it gets too late, but leave yourself open to take a couple of those flyers late, because if you do hit on one, they can't hit really big. So if I'm doing redraft, I will definitely skew more heavily towards running back. And, one of the things I've really taken from Dynasty is that I tend to go a little bit younger at running back in redraft and in best ball than I used to. I've just seen the value of, the older guys, they can be in the perfect situation and everything, like Lev Bell. I don't have a whole lot of them, even though, we're hearing all the right things now and everything, and everybody's talking about, I'd just rather have a Jonathan Taylor or something like that. Lev Bell might get me a few more points early in the year, but at the end of the year, when I really need those points, I'm thinking Jonathan Taylor's probably going to be more likely the guy, or, DeAndre Swift or Cam Akers or whoever it might be, who's going in that same range as Bell. So with running backs, I tend to lean towards the younger option as much as I can.
I think Kyle smirked there because my sell was Bell and my buy was Jonathan Taylor on his.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And you guys are spot on. One other thing I'll point to, just as a quick example, I just finished recording a mock draft episode, and this is for redraft, but I'm sitting there in round 3, and for third round value, I like Leonard Fournette. I think just in redraft, one season, targets will come down, but still probably 45 catch guys, pretty safe. I was staring down Leonard Fournette or DJ Moore, Allen Robinson, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, Calvin Ridley, all guys I love, and I love all of those guys over Leonard Fournette. But I had to take Fournette, knowing that I was going to get one of them coming back, and I did. Right, I got Robert Woods. I love Robert Woods this year. I love the Rams offense. They're going to pass the ball a ton. So those are the decisions. It's just you kind of have to think of running backs kind of how you think of when you see quarterbacks. You're like, man, how can I pass up? Am I really going to take, am I really going to take Todd Gurley over, Patrick Mahomes? Yeah, you kind of have to, right? Because the position, that quarterback position is so deep. Same thing with the running backs. When you see these running backs, yeah, they're not great, but when you're comparing them to wide receivers, there are just so many wide receivers. Just, give it, just keep that in mind and see what can get back to you. And if you feel comfortable with, hey, as long as one of these guys makes it back, I'm good. You just have to take that approach, because more than ever, it seems like that I'm just having to take these running backs when I usually wouldn't. I do usually lean the wide receiver route, but at the end of the day, bigger picture, when you look at it in hindsight, you're like, okay, yeah, I should have made this decision, or I'm glad I took the running back there.
Sorry, Dan, I was just going to say it's opportunity cost, but it's opportunity cost relative to, each position, right? Because you're passing up a guy in the same round, but it's all relative to how deep or how shallow that position is, right? Sure.
Yeah. And Dan had a good point. Obviously, if you're willing to take, in the draft I was talking about, I wanted Saquon and Mixon early. If you end up taking, say, Godwin and Thomas early, you start having to take running backs on your dynasty team that are aging. If you take those young guys early, you're able to wait, and you're able to fill your team in with AJ Browns and DJ Charks and high upside wide receivers several rounds later, where if you're taking those wide receivers early, those running backs you're going to get in rounds 5, 6, 7 are guys that are going to last 2 years.
Yeah, and as much as we say, well, you want to zig when everybody else zags and all that kind of stuff. To a certain extent, when you're talking about a scarce resource like really good starting running backs, like running backs that can help you win a league, they're a scarce resource to start with. And then when everybody is jumping on them early, you really end up having to kind of follow the herd a little bit, because it's going to push the wide receiver value down anyway. So it's not really hurting you. As long as you're still seeing running backs that you like. When you start reaching for a running back and you're reaching down a tier at running back, and there's still a much better tier wide receiver, then it's definitely time to change horses and get back on the wide receivers. But you've got to, if you got to take the running backs when you can get the running backs of the ones that are going to really carry your teams.
Look at any dynasty rankings of the running back position from 2 years ago. Right. I mean, we have no freaking clue who's going to be there. The wide receivers you can usually bank on. You feel a lot safer about who's going to be there. I mean, it's almost hilarious when you go back. Even look at scoring. on who the top scorers were at the running back position from, 2, 3, 4 years ago, those names just turn over like, so frequently. So it's just like, yeah, you gotta go for youth there, obviously. But if you can get your hands on those guys that are, can carry for 3-4 seasons, so freaking valuable,
Mm-hmm. And I think it's going to change again in Dynasty. I mean, when I first started, it was 2014, 2015, and all those influxes of those young stud wide receivers. And that's why we wanted to take them early, and running backs got faded big time. Now you look at those guys, and Hopkins and Thomas and Adams, they're all getting a little bit older. And now you aren't willing to risk as much to, push your way up that way. You're more looking more for those guys with a little bit of value later on.
And that's also why they say a wide receiver that's been a wide receiver 1, finished top 12, has a way higher chance of getting back up there. So if you think about all the guys that have been there, all of them trying to squeeze in, it's easier to kind of predict who those top tier guys are. Whereas running backs, we think we know, and then injuries and COVID whoop our ass, Dan?
Yeah, I was looking at the top 12. I mean, like I said, 54% hit rate, and I'm looking at those guys. Try to tell me who's not going to finish in that top 12 just looking at that list. I mean, it's almost feels impossible aside from injuries. You're like, yeah, they're easily all going to finish there, and half of them won't. It's just how it goes.
Yeah, and and really at least half of the ones that don't end up being because of injury, and it's the kind of injuries that you just really can't predict. So, one of the reasons why you were talking about look at dynasty rankings from 2 years ago, I think that's a very valuable exercise, because you look at Todd Gurley and David Johnson and Melvin Gordon and guys like that, that were on top of the world, basically first round picks, some of them high first round picks, and now they're 5th, 6th round startup picks or so. But that's what happens, when you get a running back that hits like 25, they're starting to hit their second contract. Yeah. And, that's when things can happen. That's why I tend to skew a little bit younger at running back. Wide receiver age doesn't bother me as much, but at running back, it's definitely it's a young man's game. And you've just, I would rather, when you take a look at 2 years ago, who's remaining that, up towards the top, it's generally going to be those guys who are 21, 22, 23 2 years ago that are still at the top right now. Like if you look 2 years ago, you're going to see Kamara and you're going to see Ezekiel Elliott because they were young back then. And so they're still able to be on top of their game, but you also know, they've got a limited shelf life now because they've been at the top of the game for a while, and it just, sooner or later something happens. So you have to play the percentages a little bit on that and just say, what, I'm going to, like last night I was on the war zone,
that's so awesome. I really enjoyed that. But when I saw that was funny because me and Memphis and Jerry are like so tight. So I had JD and they had you, and I messaged Memphis. I'm like not even planned. I'm like, that's pretty awesome. So I enjoyed that.
Yeah, no doubt. Those guys are a hoot to be on with too. But we're talking about, what you can do, if you've got like a 105 in Superflex, you're probably at Zeke Elliott range right there, right? And you can take that pick and you can trade that like a 10th, 11th round pick or something like that, and you can pick up a second and a third round pick and turn Zeke Elliott into Jonathan Taylor and DeAndre Swift, for example. So when you can do things like that, it's like, man, I can get two guys whose teams just drafted them that are probably going to be pretty committed to them, that have youth on their side and everything else, versus this guy who's got, 1,250, 1,300 carries, whatever Zeke's got right now. And Zeke's been an Iron Man. Don't get me wrong. There's still plenty of value in Zeke, but give me if I'm starting up, give me those two younger guys where I might, I could hit a double on that, and if both of them smash, I'm way ahead. If one of them smashes, I'm probably about where I expected to be just by drafting Zeke. The only way I lose is if both of them end up flaming out and never becoming anything.
Yeah, one of the kind of outside of fantasy podcasts I really like, and you guys talk about Dynasty Warzone. I always feel like I got to shout out Randy because he introduced me to RJ Bell and Straight Out of Vegas, and I've learned a lot about reading lines and just how much Vegas knows about they set these lines and they're pretty accurate with them. And there's a reason, right? And there's a reason that they distribute the points and all that kind of stuff. But the reason I was bringing this up is a couple weeks ago, I believe now, I can never remember, but anyways, sometimes I'm behind. So a few episodes ago, they were talking specifically about kind of running backs, and they were looking exactly at that, and that's funny, Dan, because I remember, I would say 2-3 years ago, even maybe like 5 years ago, because probably longer than that, but it was like 24 to 27 was kind of the range for the running backs. But now, because they're coming in early, they're starting, like they're getting an opportunity a lot quicker, it seems. And that kind of has shifted down. And now it's more like 22 to 25 is kind of the sweet spot. And you can move your stud when he's at the top of the game, right in that 25 range, whether it's 24, 25-ish, around there, especially a guy, like you said, like Zeke, with all that action in those legs, then you're kind of ahead of the game. And it all fits with what you talked about, Dan. And again, we're big believers, and Kyle talked about it, is investing that draft capital in your running backs. And in the GOAT leagues, we talk about it often, it's draft your running backs and trade your for receivers, right? That's just the smart way to build a roster, and in a way that you can continue to not lose value. The last thing I want to add, just regards to strategy, is just, I was explaining when I was on with Kyle, like in best ball, I always say you're telling a story with every roster that you build, right? And with the running back position, I like to go top heavy with my running backs. And the reason is, you invest early in those guys. I feel like I'm capping, and Dan, I would love for you to comment on this, because you're like, you're the best ball guru. So with regards to, I feel like if you do that, you're capping your upside, right? By grabbing like handcuffs and worrying about one of your top maybe 5 to 7 picks ever getting injured or not getting the role that you feel, you know what I mean? Like kind of setting a safety blanket. I feel like in a best ball, you're never going to reach your ceiling by doing that. So it's something that I normally avoid. Whereas what I was telling Kyle is, when I have a lineup to set up, I like the opposite. So in best ball, I want a lot of receivers, top heavy at running back. And then when I'm building my Dyno rosters or anywhere I need to set a lineup, I want to be slim at receiver. I don't want to make too many decisions. I just want guys that I believe in enough that I can play lineups a bit, but I want depth at running back position.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's exactly what it is, because in best ball, if your top, 2 or 3 running backs hit, it really almost doesn't matter what else you have at running back. So, it makes sense to, if you put a lot of draft capital into running back, you draft them early, you don't need to draft that many, like there's a lot of time, there's a strategy of going hyper fragile, just drafting 3 running backs in your first 3 picks, if you can get the right ones, and then just saying, I'm not going to draft any more running backs. And if those running backs stay healthy, you have a great chance, because you are so stacked at all the other positions, and you have, 2 or 3 stud running backs already on your roster. So, I don't normally go quite that extreme, but, there are a lot of times where I'll just draft 4, in the first 5 or 6 rounds or whatever. And I'll say, you know what, I'm good at running back. I put enough capital into it. Now I'm just going to pound away at wide receiver. But you're right. In a dynasty, it gets really hard when you have to pick who to start all the time. So you want to make sure you've got good enough receivers, and then let some of that depth fall at running back, because you can all of a sudden, find yourself in a situation where your studs are out and you're still looking to try to get a title, or at least finish in the money, unlike best ball, where it's like you're number 1 or it doesn't even matter.
Mike, let's get into some specific players. Before we do, anything to add, guys, like with regards to strategy or with this position that we haven't maybe talked about? All right.
Nailed it.
It. I need to get a sound effect for that. Mike, why don't you start it off? I know Dan already talked about actually it's perfect, because he said, perfect buy and a perfect sell. So now that he's thrown my guys out there, I'm done for the night. So I'm just going to shut it. I'm going to go grab another beer. I'm going to hand it to Mike and just start the convo, man. Like it's the time of year right now where, if you really, really want to win, this is the time to take advantage and start making moves that people might not even realize what's happening. You know what I mean? And if you can catch a couple owners off guard with some moves, that's what we want to help you with right now. So let's talk running backs. Let's talk guys that maybe were, out there trying to get or targeting or avoiding, or maybe that we feel is a good time to sell right now?
Yeah. The guy that I'm buying right now, and some of the ADPs are out of control, but the guy that I'm buying right now is Josh Jacobs. And you guys were talking about running backs who are approaching that, 25, 26-year-old, where you're talking Kamara and Mixon and Chubb and even Dalvin Cook. I'm talking about trading back and adding some extra capital and getting a guy like Josh Jacobs. He came out today, he said he wants, he's aiming for 60 receptions this year. What we saw from him in college, that was his best trait. And the Raiders, I feel like, really held him back that first year, not unleashing everything that he had here. Only 20 receptions last year, but he was the highest graded running back for all rookies, from PFF, and 8th in touchdowns, 10th in yards per carry. If you add 60 receptions, so if he goes from 20 to 60 receptions, we're looking at a guy in 13 games, you're adding 3 points per game. That takes him from, being that RB 16 like he was, as a 21-year-old. Now he's 22. That puts him firmly in that RB 5 to 7 range. And I feel like the ceiling, obviously, I want my running backs to have a high ceiling with PPR involved. And the biggest narrative between him and the jersey that's behind me with Miles Sanders is that he doesn't catch passes. But his pass catching ability, yeah, exactly. His pass catching ability is phenomenal, and I feel like both of those guys had great pass catching ability coming in, but we're telling us a narrative about Miles Sanders that he's going to run the show and Boston Scott's there. We tell the same narrative with Josh Jacobs, saying that, Lynn Bowden comes in and they're going to, maintain Jalen Richard. And now all of a sudden Josh Jacobs is going to fall off a little bit. I don't see that. That's a guy that I'm buying because the narrative on Twitter is they're selling. And with all the weapons that have come in there and Edwards and Ruggs, that offense is going to be a little bit more explosive. Last year, you look at things with just Waller and Renfro and Tyrell Williams. The offense was short. It was compacted. They opened things up a little bit, and I think Josh Jacobs is going to have a great breakout season here.
I love it, man. Sorry, Dan. I love the Jacobs. I love the Jacobs, man, out there in Oakland. And I actually love that fantasy land is doubting his receiving ability. Yeah. I mean, with that offensive line, what are they top? You look at rankings, they're usually top 6, 7, around there, top 8. Yeah. He's just a guy, like, especially as soon as that narrative that he's not going to catch the ball, and Mr. Richards is out there catching the ball, and whoever else they brought in that people are worrying about. But I don't know, man. The guy to me is a beast. Him and Sanders are those two guys that, like, in my first ever FFPC that I joined, Dynasty, is a 500. And they're my two running backs right now, Sanders and Jacobs. And I'm pumped, man. I got them paired up with Chubb, so I'm ready to go.
I love Miles Sanders. I mean, I got his jersey back here. I'm an Eagles fan. I love him. But what's crazy to me is Josh Jacobs was the 101, and Miles Sanders most of the time was 103, 104, 105. Sure. And just because Sanders caught those 50 passes, which those final 6 weeks he balled out. But again, in Philly, there was nothing else there. I mean, right. Austin Scott played well, but there was no one else. So they had to employ everything they basically had there. And I don't think we should be – I mean, right now there's a good 6, 7 picks where I feel like you could get Josh Jacobs and a second for Miles Sanders already.
Yeah, that's probably true. And, I love it when Roto World helps you out. Sometimes they hurt you. Like, yesterday they tossed out, where people should have been connecting the dots long ago with James White and how he's a great fit with Cam Newton. And, that's dots I've been connecting all off season since Newton started. And even before that, I was like, whoever they have at quarterback is going to be checking down a lot. So it's James White year. But finally Roto World comes out and they throw that out there for the masses, and immediately, James White's value spikes. They did the opposite thing with Josh Jacobs. This one is so hilarious, the one that came out today. And they said, Mayak has already expressed optimism that Jacobs will be more involved in the passing game, but it's so much easier said than done when Jalen Richard is still on the team after inking an extension. I mean, I cannot read that without laughing my ass off. That is just, I know we have this first round pick here, and he did a super job catching the ball at Alabama, but yeah, Jalen Richard is going to be the one who's catching all the passes. Right. Okay. Sure.
Well, and part of me sees that, like when DeAndre Washington took over, when Jacobs was hurt, they kind of implored him a little bit more, like I thought they would Jacobs. But I feel like they might have held him back a little bit. They knew they weren't really going anywhere because Washington.
And that's not unusual too for the first year. I mean, you don't want to put too much on a guy's plate. So look at how Miles Sanders was handled. They babied him through the first part of the year until they got to a part where they just had no choice but to feed him everything. And, with Jacobs, they never really reached that point. Plus, he had the shoulder issue, which has got to make catching passes a little bit more difficult when your shoulder's not right. So there's an easy way to see why he wasn't catching those balls last year. So I think that's a huge oversight by Fantasyland, that they just think, oh, well, he didn't do it last year, so he's going to be Sony Michel and just never catch passes. I just don't buy that at all.
I mean, we'll talk trades a bit later on. Mike, anything off? Like, do you have any trades or anything? Like, do you have? And I know you talked about Jacobs in a second with regards to Sanders, right? So let me ask you this: when we talk about that top tier, those top 5 running backs, are you comfortable moving one of those guys for Jacobs plus in a package?
I am not moving McCaffrey or Saquon, but I mean, I'm more than comfortable. The guys I was talking about with, I would move Zeke and get Jacobs plus a first and probably even a little bit more on top of that, because what you're doing is you're just resetting the clock if you believe in that player. And I believe he's going to be a high end, at least mid to high end RB1 from season to season. And you're just resetting the clock and making yourself younger. And right now you're looking at Mixon and Nixon and Dalvin and Kamara don't have contracts. Josh Jacobs is locked up for a couple of years. And the Raiders offense, I'm starting to like. I mean, I know it sounds weird, but I'm starting to really come around on it. And Derek Carr is going to play with a chip on his shoulder. And I don't know why. I don't know why, but I like it.
Dan, you gotta back up that laugh, man. That was hilarious.
I said that for my one friend, a huge Raiders fan.
Because, on Twitter, there's a few guys who are just, they're kind of going over the top on the Raiders. I think Elliot Christ was one of them. That Josh Jacobs is going to have 10,000 yards and get 20 touchdowns, and Brian Edwards is just going to be the Messiah, and they're kind of laughing about this is probably a 6-10 team, and we all think that they're going to have this huge offensive explosion. And to a certain extent they're right, but also to a certain extent, you can be good on offense and still not have a great record. That is possible. The Raiders defense has some work to do. And, they, for that reason, the Raiders offense might be, really having to air it out or, keep their foot on the gas pedal if they have a small lead because they know their defense can't hold it. So, I don't really see a problem with some bullish Raiders predictions. I mean, not everybody is going to, do great. Obviously, there's going to be winners and losers on that offense. But I think Josh Jacobs has definitely cemented himself already as a winner. We have a lot of receivers that have no experience whatsoever that, probably some of them are not going to do as well as we think.
So you're not saying Jalen Richard season?
No, I'm not going there. I'm not going to say that. It is not Jalen Richard season. It will never be Jalen Richard season. It's never been Jalen Richard season.
It wasn't even Jalen Richard season last year when Jacobs was out for 3 games. Like
right. Yeah, it was DeAndre Washington. And they give. Sometimes the team will give a contract like that to a backup running back who they just feel comfortable with. And they're just saying, what, if something happens to Jacobs, here's a guy we know can do the job. Not great. We might look around and see if we can find somebody who can do the job better, but at least we have a fallback option we feel kind of comfortable with. And, this is a contract we can live with because we got the extra cap room right now. And by the time salary cap crunch comes around, he's going to be really easy to cut. So they just don't really care about that money right now as much as some other teams might.
So let me ask you guys this. Let's do a quick on the clock. Kyle, I'm going to go to you first. Josh Jacobs or CEH, the new hotness?
I still take Josh Jacobs. I have them actually back to back my dynasty rankings. I think, for Edwards-Helaire, I still think he's obviously super talented. We talked about when we were talking running backs, like him going in the first round is, there's so many. He checks all the right boxes. Great offensive line paired with Andy Reid. Pass catcher, all those things. But the last time I looked at a rookie running back and actually considered him as a first rounder was Zeke. But I don't put CEH in that same talent. And when Zeke came in, that Dallas team had already proven that they were the best rushing offense in the league. So I like Edwards-Helaire a lot, and for me, he probably has more upside than Josh Jacobs just because of the offense. But I'm still going to bank on Jacobs. I feel like he's just a little bit more of a known commodity at this point. If I miss, I miss, but I still have Josh Jacobs, who I think is in an offense that is going to improve. So I actually have him back to back, so that's tough. But I'm going to lean with Josh Jacobs and try to fend off that rookie fever just a bit.
I'm taking Clyde Edwards-Helaire and then I'm trading him. I mean, I was going to say,
I like it.
That was the right answer.
I did a rookie draft.
My answer.
I mean, I get 50, 60 questions a week about Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And I just recently traded down from the 101 where the guy wanted Edwards-Helaire back to the 105, got 221 firsts and took J.K. Dobbins. Like the heat is unreal. And explain this to me. He's going, his ADP right now is 105. So Kareem Hunt as a rookie comes in 1,800 total yards, 13 touchdowns, catches 70 passes, and his highest ADP ever was 108. I mean, we're already putting him above that, and obviously things that happened with Hunt were undeniable. But I mean, he gets to play with Mahomes for 5 years. So if I have to pick one and keep them without trading them, it's Edwards-Helaire. But I would really like to. I feel like you can trade back and add some extra value for sure.
Twitter has been out of their mind from day one with this kid. It started off as okay, all these running backs. Oh yeah, Edwards-Helaire, and then the hype started building up before draft, and then I remember a lot of people put this out there, but we were watching a draft live. I was hopping on other shows and all that stuff, and it came to it, and I was like, if Clyde Edwards-Helaire gets drafted by the Chiefs, Twitter is going to explode, and sure as shit, it did, just insane. And then Damian Williams opts out for valid reasons that we should all be at least considerate of. There's a lot more than football going on in everyone's life right now, but he opts out for a valid reason. And all it is, you just go on Twitter and it's CEH victory laps all over the place. I'm like, my God, just own it down.
You didn't draft Clyde Edwards-Helaire with the worry of Damon Williams.
Right.
You're not drafting Jonathan Taylor in Dynasty with the worry of Marlon Mack. I mean, that's just not what it is. And then people are freaking out. And the worst one I saw was a guy. He really had the rookie fever, and he messaged me and he's like, "Hey, Mike, what can I do with here? I really want Clyde Edwards-Helaire." And the guy offered me he wants McCaffrey for Clyde Edwards-Helaire in a second. And I'm like, whoa. I was like, you can't give up a guy like Christian McCaffrey. That's what you hope he becomes. And drafting a guy like Clyde Edwards-Helaire at 105, where can he go? Anywhere? Mm-hmm. Can he go up any higher? Maybe a spot.
No.
Yeah, that's a tough sell. I mean, to get back to the original question, for my own team, I would prefer to have Jacobs. If I thought I could take Helaire and, flip him for Jacobs and a little something extra, I think that's definitely the move. I think Mike nailed it right there. But, as Kyle was saying, I think Jacobs is the guy that you really want to be starting because, the Chiefs, as multiple as that offense is, I mean, Hilaire's going to get a lot of gimme scores, and it's going to definitely help that Williams is not around there as well. But he's a rookie. They're not going to feed him too hard. They're not going to put too much on his plate. He's going to get some help from some of the other guys. Washington's probably going to chip in a little bit. Darrell Williams is probably going to chip in a little bit. So that it's not going to be just craziness from day one, as far as what kind of fantasy points he's getting or what kind of opportunities he's getting. I think they're gonna keep things manageable for him and just sort of feed him along as best they can. Much like what happened with Josh Jacobs, much like what happened with Miles Sanders. We might see some people getting pretty disappointed and wanting to hop off Helaire a little bit earlier in the year and get on to something else because of that very fact.
Kyle, I'm going to go back to you. Is there someone that you're maybe avoiding in those top, let's say top 50-ish? Is there anyone you're maybe avoiding or selling right now?
You guys kind of stole my thunder with a few of the points that I actually had jotted down for this guy. But the guy that I'm selling right now is Dalvin Cook. He's going right now as RB6 in DLF ADP. He's going 7th overall. He just, to me, he's a hell of a player. He's in a perfect situation with a team that runs the ball a ton. They were, I believe, third in rush percentage last year. Cook is a great pass catcher as well. So that's really factors into making him, a high-end running back. And, for 2020, I think he can be that. We were all helped out by the CBA making holdouts almost a non-factor at this point, because these guys can't hold out or they start losing money. But for me, Cook is a guy that I'm trying to get out of, before people start realizing, putting 2 and 2 and together, that this guy doesn't have a contract next year, and he's one of many. So they could easily go a cheaper route by the multitude of running backs that are going to be free agents next season. They also have a fantastic option, I think, in Madison, just sitting there on the cheap. So do they just move on from him in Minnesota, and where does he land? On top of the fact he's going to be 26 before the season ends. So he's just getting to that point. He's already been a guy that has had, he struggled playing 16 games, which I won't knock him for. If he's out there for 12 to 14, I'm still okay with that. But it just adds to the pile for me that it's time to move Dalvin Cook before people start getting a little bit too keen, for everyone start highlighting that, like, all these negatives are kind of building up, and you're not going to get good price for him. So I had a share I was able to move for him a couple months ago, because I was worried about the holdout, and luckily that didn't really appear to happen. But I think it's still time to move Dalvin Cook if you can. Again, 6th overall in DLF ADP right now.
He's already at that 25 cliff.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And, and to Mike's point from earlier, at 6, there's really not much room to go but down.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to ask yourself, what are the chances that Cook is at peak value right now? And, I think they're pretty high. So yeah, I think he's a guy that you want to move. Who else do you guys like to move?
I just want to add with Cook and Dan, I don't know if you have anything to add to this, but offensive line wise, from what I understand, it's not like anything's improved much this year as well, right? So as much as they want to run the ball, and, Cousins lost one of his big weapons, it's, it'd be nice to have a nice offensive line in front of a guy like Cook that does deal with injuries. Right.
Yeah. Now with the Vikings blocking scheme, they don't need to have, like the world's greatest offensive line.
Sure.
They're more of a scheme based, doing the zone blocking and so forth like that. So, they don't need to have those massive road graders or anything. But, on the other hand, it's not a great offensive line even at that. So, they're kind of hiding the line's deficiencies a little bit just through scheme, but it's not anything that's really helping the running game out that much.
I see. Interesting.
Dalvin Cook was actually my biggest sell too, and I like when you can kind of like lock up on that. But for me right now, the guy that I am really trying to sell, and I didn't have any shares before, and I did a startup Dynasty Happy Hour writers versus Dynasty Nerds writers, and I was like 3rd round roll around in a 0.25 PPC, and I took Derrick Henry. I'm like, all right, I'll be able to trade him, right? The Derrick Henry trade window it opened now. He got a contract. I mean, Derrick Henry is great for your contending team, but you have an opportunity to finally sell Derrick Henry. I mean, running backs historically since 2011 that get less than a 7% target share, they don't finish that way. He's the only one to finish as a top 5 running back, and that's not repeatable. I just feel like it's time to get off Derrick Henry and get what you can, because it's not going to be a long, he's got 2 years on that contract and they can get out of it. But now that he's got a contract, people understand, okay, because he goes somewhere else, it might not be that same situation. They're just feeding him the rock. The touches are adding up. And I think it's time to sell Derrick Henry.
So again, not the best offensive line right out there in Tennessee. So Dan, how do you feel about Henry? You agree with Mike? Is he someone you're kind of dodging in, I guess, best balls, or is he someone that maybe you're selling in Dynasty?
I'm not really dodging Henry in best balls, because I think, he's got such a high range of outcomes, and, he does have some kind of special skills. I mean, that size and that speed is just a really rare combination. And the fact that he's, if they would just use him in the passing game a little bit, I just keep hoping that would be the case, because I mean, you get that guy a little bit of space and give him a runway. He's impossible to bring down. I mean, he's got guys ping-ponging off him all over the place, and that's something that you just can't teach. I mean, a guy's either that size or he's not, and he knows how big he is, and he knows how to use that size to bully people. You sometimes see big running backs and they run like they're a small running back. He's a big running back who knows he's a big running back, and he runs like one. And, for that reason, he can, I think he's probably going to be, always one of those guys who's, everybody's screaming regression on touchdowns, but, he's just got the body built to score touchdowns. He's got the speed to score them from long distance. So there's a lot of things I like about him. But on the other hand, those are the guys who, when they break down fast. And a lot of times you don't have a whole lot of time to get rid of them. I mean, you might not have any time at all. So when you can get a good price that you like for him, yeah, I have no problem selling him.
You taking Drake over him, Dan?
That's a really great question. You hit my weakness because you know how much I like Drake.
Kyle, you want to maybe give your thoughts on it, and maybe on the OTC I just threw at Dan, just shot, just silence them. The silence. I'm not a big Kenyon Drake fan. So when you throw that out there, for me, I'm like, oh God, like I'm probably just going to stick with Henry. I do like the fact that, he just gets so much work, led the league in attempts last year and everything. I don't think that slows down over the next couple of years, but Dan also nailed it. Like when those are the kind of guys that when they start becoming less effective, as far as in Henry's case, breaking tackles, a lot of times it's missed tackles, but for Henry, it's more of just using his strength and size. But if he loses a little bit of speed and starts having to rely on that, breaking tackles a little bit more, just through force, it's going to fall quick. And he doesn't have that, the receptions to fall back on. I mean, he had 18 last year. That was his career high. Like, just when they do throw him the ball, it's crazy. Mm-hmm. Like it seems like he always scores, right, or gets like big long plays. And it's just like, hey, why don't you do that? Maybe give him like 25 receptions or 30, and then maybe we wouldn't be as worried from a fantasy perspective. But for me, yeah, I think it's Mike obviously nailed it. The contract extension was huge for the Henry shares I do have. I at least felt like, okay, I got at least probably 2 more years. I feel good about having him on my roster. So I think he's just he's an RB2 as far as price tag goes for me and everything. But for right now, in the moment, he still has that upside because, he's the only show in town. As much as like a lot of people talk about Darrington Evans, as a nice like sleeper pick in rookie drafts, I get that. But this offense, in the 1 year we've seen it, there was no Deion Lewis. It was Derrick Henry. I mean, that's all they did. So I just love the fact that he has just such a secure workload. And with a lot of these names, including like Dalvin Cook, like I talked about, and probably some other guys, obviously, that a lot of question marks on whether they're going to be in 2021, where Derrick Henry's at. So I definitely see both sides of it. I think his value is probably about where he should be going. If you're getting him in the 3rd round, that equals up pretty well. But I just don't own him that much because the receptions are just so annoying.
District, the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text. That trash offer's the best. You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice, from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man, y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be trading. And I always be trading. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.